Hello, everybody, and welcome to the fourth of five scheduled virtual business workshops in our 2023 series. My name is Michael Casale. I am the Commissioner of the Niagara County Department of Economic Development. And before we get started on this workshop, some housekeeping items that I want to share with you. You're going to be muted throughout this presentation. If you have questions, please use the Q&A panel at the bottom of the screen, and we'll answer your questions at the end of our program. If we cannot answer all the questions in our allotted time, we will follow up with you afterwards and get you the information that you need. Today's workshop is designed to give you an overview of the various programs that are out there for you. We would be happy to schedule a one-on-one meeting with you to discuss any of the programs in more detail. Just let us know in the Q&A panel and we'll reach back out to you. And before we introduce our presenters, I wanted to let you know that if you missed our earlier workshops that discussed local business resources and state and federal programs for business, as well as workforce development and training resources, you can go to our website at www.niagaracountybusiness.com. You see there at the bottom of the page, and go to our featured events page, and you will be able to watch those recordings. We're going to also be conducting one more workshop later this year, and I'm going to have more details on that workshop following this morning's workshop. You'll also, by the way, be able to register for that workshop on the featured events page of our website. Again, if you have questions, you can contact either me or my assistant, Kathy Sinor. My contact information is here. And again, these are going to be hot links in this slide deck, which will be sent to you, by the way. Okay, today's workshop, we're focusing on brownfield cleanup and development assistance. I'd like to thank all of our presenters today for giving us their valuable time. I'd like to introduce them. You guys might want to just give a little wave. First up will be Ashita Patel, the Brownfield Program Manager for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Stan Radon, a Regional Geologist with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. Jenna Kavanaugh, who is the lead representative for economic development for National Grid. And Amy Schifferle, the Brownfield Program Manager for the Niagara County Department of Economic Development. And before we get started, again, a reminder, so you don't stress out taking fast and furious notes, we're going to be sending you an email after this morning's workshop, which will contain the slide deck that you're about to see from all of our presenters. And that slide deck will contain active links for you to click on and contact our presenters. So let's get right to it. First up is Ashita Patel, Brownfield Program Manager for the US EPA, who's going to be talking about federal brownfield funding opportunities. Ashita, take it away.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashita Patel. I'm a Brownfields project manager working for US EPA Region 2. We serve New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, and 8 federally recognized Indian nations. Next slide, please. So the Brownfields program offers many different types of grants, many different types of funding opportunities, technical assistance, and it's really important, I think, to start off with a definition of what a brownfield is. Generally, it is similar to this definition, but this is the federal brownfields definition, and we want to make sure that all interested organizations, applicants, just parties know that this is the definition we use to make sure that you are eligible for any funding opportunity that our program offers. So a brownfield is a property, the expansion, redevelopment, or reuse of which may be complicated by the presence of or potential presence of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant. And brownfields, you probably see them in your communities. They can be former residential commercial properties. An abandoned gas station is a common example, but it could also be structures that don't really look like a brownfield. Next slide, please. So these are the different types of funding opportunities organized by program within our brownfields program. We have grants, which we'll get into in a little bit. That really is the backbone of our program. It is used by all different types of organizations as long as you're eligible, and they range in funding opportunities in terms of like how much money you can get. So anything from a couple of $100,000 to like multi-million-dollar grants. We have we have our state and tribal response program where we supplement New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands, and some of the Indian nations that we work with there. So we supplement their Brownfields program. And then we have two different types of technical assistance that is offered by our targeted brownfield assessment program, and then our land revitalization and technical assistance program. So we'll get into a little bit more as we advance our slides. And then actually there was the little squiggly that said the bipartisan infrastructure law in the previous slide. And the reason we like to put that in there is because this program has always had annual appropriations allocated to all of these programs, but because of our bill, the bill funding, all of these programs have been supplemented with additional funding, and it really has allowed us to reach out to communities that potentially didn't know about our programs before, and we really want to get those communities involved in our Brownfields program. So we have funding and we want to make sure that it is being used. Next slide, please. So these are the different types of Brownfield grants that we offer. Assessment grants really are used to assess sites, your phase ones, your phase twos. Cleanup is for that purpose to remediate a site. Multipurpose allows you to assess and clean up a site. Our revolving loan fund allows the applicant to determine which private developers or sub-grants or communities they want to loan money out to or provide a sub-grant to clean up a site. And then there's a job training grant, which is a little bit different than the other four because it really is focused on building up a workforce in an area that has brownfield contaminants. Next slide, please. So just some information regarding our FY24 competition. So the solicitations for that came out about a month or maybe like 3 weeks ago, and applications, if you want to apply for some of the grants, are going to be due on November 13th, 2023. The 3 grant types that will be offered for fiscal year 24, they are the multipurpose, assessment, and cleanup grants, and we can get into more detail about those grant types. Next slide, please. So this is just an estimate of how much funding nationally the Brownfields program is allocating to each grant type. As you can see, the maximum per grant type could be in the millions. So if you have a potential site or a couple of sites that need assessment, that need remediation, I highly recommend that you talk to me or any the different representatives in your area. If you're from Niagara County, then maybe someone from there who might be familiar with this program, but really reach out because we want to make sure that if you're interested, you have the information that you need to apply to our grant projects. Next slide, please. So the next couple of slides are going to be like just quick fact sheets on the different grant types. The applicant eligibility for each grant type is going to be the same. You have to be like a public entity, or you could be a quasi-government, such as like something like a regional council, or it can be an Indian nation or a nonprofit organization. Private organizations cannot apply for our grant funding, but that doesn't mean you can't necessarily work with an applicant that receives our funding. So an assessment site is kind of what it sounds like. It's to build your inventory of brownfield sites. It's to think about cleanup planning, to think about revitalization, but primarily I think most applicants use it to conduct phase ones and phase twos for sites within their target area. And there are 3 different types of assessment grants that are offered within this umbrella term of assessment grants. Next slide. For cleanup grants, funding for each grant type could only be used for that specific purpose. So assessment funding can be used for assessments. Cleanup grants can only be used for remediation. You can't assess sites using this funding, so you want to make sure that the grant type that you're applying for really does fit your needs. And for cleanup grants, we always like to mention that the site must be owned by the organization or the applicant by the time the application is due. So for this year, November 13th, you would have to own that site in order to qualify for a cleanup grant. Next slide. Multi-purpose allows you to have funding for assessment and cleanup funds. So it is a good one to, if you have a couple of sites that need assessment and remediation. Next slide, please. And then the revolving loan fund is not offered this year, but I think it's one of the most interesting grant types that we offer because it gives flexibility and, in a way, liberty to the applicant, because they can capitalize on their own brownfields program in their specific area. They can decide which organizations they want to provide loans to, sub grants to remediate sites in their own areas. Niagara County does have revolving loan funds. I'm sure we'll get into that in a little bit, but that's the one that most, I think, private organizations are most interested in, because you can work with that organization in your area that has an RLF to potentially get a loan or a sub-grant to clean up a site. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And then job training grants, a little bit different than the other ones as mentioned earlier, but it really is to build up the workforce in a specific area. The training program can include OSHA training, it can include mold and remediation, asbestos training. Some of the bullets listed over here are just examples, but it is up to that applicant or that organization to kind of customize what works for the people in your area. Next slide, please. And then the next two slides will really just be an overview, because it is our state and tribal program really is for states and tribes, but we do offer funding to New York, New Jersey, US Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and then the 3 nations listed on the slide to supplement their own brownfields program, because we understand without our state partners, our city partners, our local community partners, this work would not be possible. Next slide, please. And then our targeted brownfields assessment program offers technical assistance to assess the site. You don't necessarily have to be a grant recipient. You can still come in if you have a site that needs assessment. And if eligible, we have a contractor that works on our behalf, and they would perform that assessment for you free of charge. So that's also another program that communities can take advantage of. Next slide, please. And then the land revitalization and technical assistance program is similar in that it offers free technical assistance, but the services that it offers is a little bit different. Our contractor can work on community outreach. It can do different types of market analysis for your community. We can think about conceptual site designs if you have a site or an area in mind. So again, free services that are offered from a contractor that works for EPA. Next slide, please. And then we have and they're also similar, with tech, so I'm sure it can be a little confusing in terms of the names, but we have our technical assistance to brownfields communities, our TAP provider. Our TAP provider for our region is New Jersey Institute of Technology, and they don't necessarily help clean up a site or assess a site, but they can help you think about how to assess a site, or think about what stacking options, leveraging options you have to really make a project work. They do free grant application reviews. Actually, all of their services are free. So even if you just have a question about our brownfields program, you could always reach out to us, but you can reach out to them as well. So they really are there to kind of supplement that communication. That can one of their aspects could be supplementing that communication between us and the communities, and reaching out to communities that are just interested about our program. But if you are interested in applying for the FY24 grant cycle, they will review your application for free, something EPA employees cannot do. So I would recommend getting in touch with them. Next slide, please. And then just some federal tax incentives are listed over here. It's not, it's not all of them. Our Brownfields Federal Programs Guide definitely has more information on the different types of tax incentives available to different types of organizations. It's not something that I'm personally well versed in, because those designations don't come from the Brownfields program. It's usually through the IRS. But these are some resources and their hot links as mentioned earlier if you want to look into that at your own time. Next slide, please. And then the last thing I want to mention is our Repowering America's Land initiative, which really is thinking about a creative way to think about how to use contaminated lands or landfills for renewable energy. So putting solar panels, for instance, on a contaminated site. This repowering mapper maps out all the sites that could be eligible for this program. The two other questions and the links that are linked over here can give you more information about that. This is not a brownfields program, so it's not something that we manage, but just wanted to put it out there. Like if there are sites that, where you think that a reuse or a redevelopment option, the best suit for that would be solar for renewable energy. This might be something interesting to look into. And then there's some FAQs, the last link, I recommend looking into that. And there are some tax credits also available for this. Next slide, please. So, that's a lot of information, a lot of different programs, but if you have any questions, I'm here and this is my contact information, so feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Ashita, thank you so much. Great information. And again, a reminder for hot links, and there are a lot of them there in the last few slides that Ashita presented. Those are going to be active links, and you'll get this slide deck with those active links, so you don't have to go crazy trying to take quick notes and writing down all those internet sites. Thank you, Ashita. Next up is Stan Radon. He's the regional geologist for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and Stan is going to tell us about New York's Brownfield Cleanup Program and the available tax credits. Stan, it's all yours.
Good morning. Thank you, everybody, for attending. But before I start, I just want to say Niagara County is very fortunate to have Amy on your team. I work with the 6 Western New York counties very closely on Superfund sites and brownfield redevelopments. And there's nobody better and more passionate than I feel than Amy in promoting Niagara County sites. And she's got a good win under her belt with the Strawberry Farm. If you saw the paper this morning, 5222 Lockport Junction Road. We just met with the applicant from Maine about 2 weeks ago, and it's an exciting project for Western New York and certainly Niagara County. Next slide, please. I won't go through the definition. Here's a link as well. A brownfield is maybe a slightly different definition than what Ashita described with the EPA, but it's a property that's impaired for either perceived or real contamination. Next slide, please. So I've been with the state for a long time, and for the first 20 years of my career, we would fight with consultants about contamination. They would come in saying, we don't have a problem, it's not contaminated. The world is upside down. Today, we have people coming in. I have probably a pre-application, a brownfield pre-application about once a week. I have one this afternoon for a project in Erie County. They are begging for us to say, yes, you have contamination. Why in the world would that world be turned upside down? It's because of New York State's really fantastic brownfield program that if you could show the state that you have contamination that meets the standards, next slide, please, then you could enter into the brownfield program and be eligible for the site preparation, which is basically removing soil, maybe dealing with contaminated groundwater. Those are called site preparation tax credits. And then if you construct a building, tangible tax credits. And we'll have some slides and tables on those as well. And, of course, everybody knows, we still have greenfield development occurring in Western New York, even though we don't really have much of a population growth. So the main intent of the program is to have some growth inward and redevelop the contaminated sites. Next slide, please. So we have, I won't spend a lot of time, but we have here in Western New York, we have the very robust brownfield program. We have, we're second only, there's 9 regions for the DEC in New York State. Region 2, which is Manhattan, New York City, has the most. Region 9, here are the 6 Western New York counties, has the second most, and brownfield projects, and we actually have more than the remaining 7 sites. So there's a lot of redevelopment occurring in Western New York. And on average, it takes, 2 to 3 years once you enter into the program to actually complete the brownfield project. Next, please. So if you have not availed yourself to a great website, and I do apologize, I did not include this link, but all you have to do is Google DEC Info Locator. You could look up air permits, water permits, brownfield sites, Superfund sites. There's different layers on the left side. These are some of the remediation parcels in Erie and some of the surrounding counties. Next slide, please. I think focuses on Niagara County. You can certainly see there's a concentration around Lockport and through the Tonawandas and up to Niagara Falls area. Next, please. So what site or what is eligible for the Brownfield program? What you really need, and here's a picture of a success story in Niagara Falls, the Tulip Corporation, which is a Brownfield site. And I know Amy has some pictures of other successful projects in Niagara County. There could be a number of ways to enter into the program, but what you really need by definition is exceeding a soil cleanup objective for your intended use of the property. So if you go to the next slide, I give you an example of a common contaminant, lead. So if you had a commercial project that you wanted to redevelop on a contaminated parcel, you would have to have contamination of lead above 1,000 parts per million, residential 400 parts per million. So that's really it. And there's lots of different contaminants. I'm just providing a general framework that we allow sites into the program based on their intended use. So if you have an industrial intention development project, if you have a lot of lead at 500 parts per million, you're not getting into the program because it doesn't exceed the intended use of the property. Next, please. So the typical process, and I won't go through each of these, and I actually did not include the pre-application process, which is an option I'm throwing out to anybody in on this call. We meet with potential applicants all of the time. You don't have to pursue the Brownfield program. Everything's confidential. We just met with the Strawberry Development on Lockport Junction Road a couple of weeks ago. So that's actually the first step, is a pre-application process. And then you go through the identification, do you have a problem, and all the way through cleanup and monitoring. We do have an application fee now in New York State of $50,000. There is a potential waiver process if you have low-income housing, or if the applicant has financial hardship. There is a process, and we have a wonderful project attorney here, Greg Scholand, who works on that. And when we meet with applicants during the pre-application process, we lay out that process. So we're in Western New York. We had this is a new, and the DEC did not ask for this $50,000. It was a legislative item. And certainly it's a little bit more onerous in Western New York than New York City. But during the pre-application process, we go through how you can potentially avail yourself to the waiver of that $50,000 application. We had the first one in New York State occur just recently for a project on Main Street in Buffalo for the Salvation Army. Next, please. So again, what sites are eligible? I went through this, the lead example. What's the reasonably intended use? So if you have commercial development and you have a 100-acre site and you had one exceedance of lead over 1,000 parts per million, would that site be eligible? Probably not. You have to show somewhat widespread distribution of contamination. Really, the site, by definition, to get in the Brownfield program requires some type of a remediation. So just like one exceedance for a large property would not be enough. We go through this during the pre-application process, and we'll be very frank. I play the devil's advocate role during that process to say, hey, look, I think you're going to need more. Or this is a slam dunk, like with 5222 Lockport Junction Road. We met, I said, this site has no issues associated with contamination from entering to the Brownfield program. So we go through that. We have very frank conversations. Next, please. So again, the process, there is the application process, and you don't have to submit the $50,000 until you actually want to execute the agreement. That Brownfield cleanup agreement generally takes about 3.5 months. the key takeaway here, again, this is the process, is I highlighted the volunteer or participant. There are different tax structures associated with each. So you would be considered a volunteer if you just purchased a property and want to enter into the Brownfield program. For instance, the strawberry farm, the applicant is just purchasing the property or acquiring it from Niagara County, definitely a volunteer. So there's some financial incentives that most people want to be a volunteer entering the program. As a participant, if you own that property for 15 years, you could enter into the Brownfield program, but we would not consider you a volunteer because you've owned it for a long period of time. You would then have to pay, there's some additional costs associated with being a participant versus a volunteer. So what I'm telling you is if you own a property and you're considering entering the Brownfield property and you've only owned it for a couple of years, you got to get a move on, because after a few more years, you're going to be a participant and not as lucrative and more expensive for you moving forward through the Brownfield program. Next, please. So there's different types of cleanups. Track 1 and track 4, I highlighted, those are the most common. Track 1 is where you remove all of the contamination associated with the site. There's no residual contamination. Those are your maximum tax credits. That's probably the second most common cleanup track for the Brownfield program. The first is the track 4, where there's some removal of material and then you put a cover system down. It could be asphalt, it could be clean fill. And that's a track 4 cleanup. There's tax credits associated with that, however, not as lucrative as the track 1. And we certainly don't have time to really discuss those nuances here. Next, please. So here are some of the tax credits. Again, showing at the bottom, the industrial track 4 versus track 1 cleanups. There are just, the more you do, the more tax credits you will receive. If you're in a Brownfield opportunity area, you'll receive 5%. If you have additional affordable housing, manufacturing. So, and these are the current. We've gone through, this is the 3rd generation of the Brownfield program. So you could see the track 4 industrial has the least, still lucrative tax credits, but less than the track 1 remediation. So these are the various tax credits. At the end of the slides show, I do have a contact for our tax department, which specifically deals with Brownfield tax credit questions. I also have my contact information, and we generally refer those specific questions for tax credits to our tax department. Next, please. So again, the better the cleanup, the more tax credits are available. Next, please. So here are some of the little bit easier to read slides. Track 1, track 4, affordable housing, 3 times site prep. There is a cap on some of these expenditures. So this all becomes part of your business decision and your business analysis. So, in the Brownfield program, you usually have, as an applicant, you have an environmental consultant and you have an attorney, an environmental attorney. And that's part of internal discussions. What do you do? What type of cleanup? Track 1, track 4. What are your upfront costs? Track 1, upfront costs are higher, but long term, you're done with the DEC. There's no monitoring. So long term, it might be more beneficial. But those are all questions that have to be, addressed internally. Next, please. So we have a highly successful program in Niagara County. We've had a number of successes in the Buffalo area. There's neighborhoods that have been transformed, like Chandler Street, where applicants have gone in and changed the whole dynamics of a neighborhood. The former Bethlehem Steel property in Lackawanna, that's a different example of where there's a large industrial property that's been segmented into Brownfield parcels that has undergone a real rebirth as well. So it's been highly successful and preserves green space. Next, please. Here's some more links for BOAs. That's the BOA program is Department of State, and I won't spend any time on that. Next, please. And here's my contact information. I am available all the time to answer your questions. And I also included Matt Golke's information, or at least his email address at the bottom for specific questions regarding tax issues associated with the Brownfield cleanup program. So thank you again for attending, and please feel free to reach out to me at any time. I work very closely with Amy. We have a very dedicated staff here in Buffalo, very proud of the Brownfield program, and we're aggressively move forward with projects that we have in front of us. Thank you.
Stan,
Stan, we
Go
have a
ahead.
question for you.
Sure.
Before we move on, excuse me, from Ben. He's wondering, is there any evidence that the $50,000 application fee is hindering the number of applicants? And what are the criteria for the waiver?
To answer the first part of that, I would have guessed yes. The answer is no. We have been very busy with pre-applications and receiving applications. So no, it has not. In fact, I think we are receiving more pre-application meeting requests this year than the prior years. So maybe down the road it might affect some things. Again, we have a number for the fee waiver process. There is affordable housing. If the applicant can show financial hardship for some reason, if there's some community redevelopment projects, I could answer if whoever, Ben, if wants to email me, we have our regional attorney laid out a general approach to the waiver application process. Again, it's relatively new. We're working through this, so there's not a great set of criteria, but we've had the first successful waiver here in Western New York in Region 9. So any other questions?
That's all I see right now, but if anybody else has a question, feel free to put it in the chat box or the Q&A panel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. A lot of great information. Thank you. Good question, Ben. Next up, our next presenter is Jenna Kavanaugh, who's the lead representative of economic development for National Grid, who will share some information on National Grid's Brownfield redevelopment program. Jenna, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Mike. I appreciate you having me here today. Good morning, everyone. As Mike said, I'm the lead economic development representative for National Grid. I joined the organization this past February. Prior to that, I'd been in economic development, working with Niagara County IDA over the past, say, 20 years almost. And I have been on the flip side of the coin. I have applied to grants for National Grid, so I kind of know where you're coming from. As you know, National Grid is one of two primary electric service utility providers in the area, serving more than 45,000 commercial and over 1,000 industrial customers. Oh, I'm sorry, next slide. And we'll skip that one. Okay, and next slide, please. Great. So within National Grid, economic development is critically important. Our programs work to support attracting and growing capital investment and jobs to the region. You know, as we're all here, because, you know, adequate infrastructure availability cost is ranked really among the top 10 factors for companies making location decisions, especially for energy intensive users like manufacturers. And it is definitely a critical component for existing companies contemplating an expansion. Next slide. So at National Grid, we have, next slide, please. We have a suite of economic development programs for both commercial and industrial use, and they focus on things like site development, urban revitalization, Main Street development, all focused on facilitating customer growth through infrastructure assistance, energy efficiency, productivity, and we work on programs or projects like vacant buildings, brownfield reclamation, infrastructure upgrades, and all because we know investment in economic development creates vibrant and resilient communities. Next slide, please. So when I joined National Grid, I looked back, and so I pulled this probably, just late winter of last year. We had done over $2 million in economic development grants since 2021. As you can see, they span a gamut of those programs from manufacturing productivity, 3-phase, to Main Street revitalization and brownfields. And today we will focus on the brownfield. Next slide, please. Thank you. But there are a variety of common characteristics that I'll talk about for all of these programs. The programs are available on shovelready.com, but they are very nuanced. So there's a little bit of details within each. So the best thing to do if you have an interest in any of them is to call me, describe your project, and we'll talk about it. But all of the programs, we have a rolling application process, so you can apply at any time. Key point of this, though, is that the grants are reimbursable after the project is completed. And there is only one project or one grant that can be applied to a customer from the suite of economic development programs at a time. So we want to make sure that you're engaged with the right program for you. Again, these are really focused on commercial, industrial, and some agribusiness projects. And we really want to make sure as we're moving forward that we're looking at efficiency and renewable energy programs that can also support those projects. Next slide. So we do have a brownfield revitalization program because, as we all know, they pose legal, financial burdens in a community. Site development, there's so much need for sites, great sites right now in the community. So making these sites usable and marketable and just powerful engines of economic vitality are really important. So our program provides grants to fund the utility-related infrastructure improvements, demolition, abatement, and some of those other costs necessary to progress that redevelopment. Next slide. The Brownfield program is the maximum grant allowable through the program is $300,000, and those program funds may be used up to 25% of the eligible costs of a project. Within that, when we're talking about the phase 1 and 2, those environmental investigations, 25,000 of the 3,000 could be applied to those assessments. Again, with a max of 300,000. Next slide, please. So once you go to shovelready.com, you've read over the Brownfield program, you're asking, does this qualify? I'd say the best thing to do is give me a call. We'll look at the location, the scope of your program or your project. We'll talk about the cost estimates that you have received for your brownfield cleanup and the timeline of the project. And we want to evaluate every project to make sure that it fits and make sure that it fits brownfield versus one of the other projects or programs that we have available. This again is a reimbursable program. The one thing I love too about our brownfield cleanup program is that it's reimbursable when the brownfield project is complete, when the cleanup is complete and you've received that certificate of remediation. That is when you can submit for reimbursement versus the complete, if there's construction or other capital investments happening. It's about the brownfield. And then, when you also call me to discuss, I'll also prepare on what you need to submit so that you have everything ready for the grant application. And then we'll also discuss payout at that time too, and the process and what documentation you'll need to prepare. Next slide, please. So just in summary, we have a suite of shovel-ready programs, which includes the brownfield as well as many others. But we also have energy efficiency programs at National Grid that you can tap into as you're undergoing construction, or if you're an existing facility and you have older lighting, older compressors, things like that. We can discuss rebates. We also have an EV charging program that supports the infrastructure to enhance your facilities with EV. And if there's any questions, next slide, or you want to discuss the program in detail, don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here. Have you checked the chat box, Kathy? Are there any questions?
We do. Well, we have, going back to Stan, I know when he mentioned the cost of the application, everybody went, whoa.
I'm trying to get something in there right now. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, because we're asking about if it's tax deductible.
Yeah. Those are questions I won't be able to answer. Again, this is a work in progress. this is all relatively new, and New York State enacted this application fee without any real process behind it. So we are working through it. I'm trying to paste something here. It's a little lengthy. I could send this to you in an email, Kathy, if you'd like, and you could post it if you'd
Absolutely.
like. That might
Stan,
be easier to get it in. I'm trying to get it all in this box and it's not working too well. So
yeah, if you want to send it to me, and then when I
will.
go ahead and send out the slide deck to all the attendees, I'll make sure I include that as
I'll
well.
do that. That'll be easier. I'm struggling here to get all this information in the chat box.
Don't do that, Stan. Another question popped up, Kathy?
No, just someone else interested in the waiver, but we'll make sure that we get that linked out to everybody.
Okay, great. Again, great, excellent information. Appreciate it. Go ahead.
I think there was a question, someone asking whether the Brownfield cleanup program from National Grid can be combined with other programs. And I did want to say, yes, it is actually, that could be some of those matching funds that are used for the program. So thank you for that.
Thank you,
Jen.
Jen.
I missed that one.
Okay, again, if you have a question, just throw it in there and we'll make sure that we try to get you the answer you need. And if we can't do it today, we'll make sure we do it within the next day or two. Okay, we got our cleanup hitter on deck. And that's our final presenter, Amy Schifferly, Brownfield Program Manager with the Niagara County Department of Economic Development, who's going to talk to us about exactly what a brownfield is here in Niagara County and the Niagara County Brownfield Program. Amy, take it away.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks, Stan, for all the kind words. I really appreciate it. It's been a great partnership, with all of our panelists. And Niagara County is really fortunate to have all of you here today to hear about all the different programs. And I hope some of the attendees give some consideration to investing in some of the brownfields that we have in Niagara County. Next slide. Because we certainly have a brownfields problem here. We have several hundred brownfield sites. I'm working on an updated inventory right now, and I think we're in the range of about 585 or so brownfield properties. And those really range from small old gas stations. It seems like every corner had a gas station in the 40s and 50s. And, we also have a really strong industrial base. The Niagara River helped power some of that. And, we have a lot of chemical manufacturing facilities, old industrial facilities. We also have a lot of properties that are tax delinquent, and they haven't been foreclosed on because Niagara County doesn't want to be stuck with the extreme cleanup costs at those sites. And it really has become an issue that Niagara County is taking very seriously. And we've taken quite a few steps to stop that bleeding and really start pulling some of those properties out of what I lovingly refer to as our little black hole. Next slide. So we have been really fortunate because we've been able to tap into a lot of different funding sources. And I think, everybody, probably all of the attendees understand that you can't just use one funding source to make a project happen. It's really about the capital stacking. And sometimes you have to get creative at that funding and figuring out what pieces of the puzzle you can put together to make that project financially work. So we've had a long-standing history with EPA for the past 24 years, and we've taken advantage, I think, of pretty much every single program EPA has had to offer over the years, from assessments to cleanups. As Ashia mentioned, we have a revolving loan fund program that has been very successful. We also have had multiple EPA assessment grants that we've used. State planning grants, and obviously the state brownfields cleanup program that has been a key at getting some of these properties moving to the next step. And we've tapped into National Grid as well. And I'm going to talk about a couple projects in a minute that has utilized almost every one of these sources. So next slide. For the EPA Brownfields Technical Assistance, we recently completed a project in the city of Lockport, and we had phase ones, phase twos on the majority of these properties through other EPA assessment grants. But after you do your assessments, it's kind of like, what do you do next? So we were able to tap into that technical assistance that Ashita was talking about, and we came up with some reuse planning and market assessments. And now the community is able to take these and move these forward to try to get actual development on these properties. Next slide. So site assessments, as Ashita mentioned, there's an open solicitation out right now for EPA grants, and EPA is a great assessment program. We've done assessments on 149 parcels throughout Niagara County with those EPA grant funds. And so that has been a real benefit to us, because really, unless you know what's on these properties, you don't know how to move forward with them. And it's a very beneficial program. I recommend anybody who's available to take advantage of that program, do so. Next slide. I'm trying to move quick because I want to make sure there's a couple minutes left for questions. So Niagara County, as some of you may know, we have a land bank. It's Niagara and Orleans County, and it also includes the 3 cities in Niagara County, so Niagara Falls, Lockport, and North Tonawanda. And the land bank was set up with a dual focus. One of the basis was because we have all these tax delinquent properties, and what do we do with them? And so one of the solutions was tackling brownfields through our land bank, because then we have more control over these abandoned properties. And we're also trying to reinvest in those strategic neighborhoods. Stan mentioned there's a neighborhood in Buffalo that's really been transformed because of the brownfields, and that's kind of what we're trying to do here in Niagara County. And so the land bank has been a really great partner to move these properties forward. Next slide. One of the big things that Niagara County did, because we have such a long legacy of industrial pollution, Superfund sites, and I'm going to say it, we got Love Canal. So that, I think, has put that mindset in place that every site is significantly contaminated and we want nothing to do with it. We don't want to foreclose on it because we don't want to be stuck in that chain of title. I think one of the big things that really has helped us kind of move that needle and change that mindset is we entered into an agreement with DEC that offers us liability protections when we are involuntarily acquiring these contaminated tax delinquent properties. One of our first test cases was we had a vacant manufacturing facility, and the owner was delinquent on property taxes. And we sold that tax lien to a private developer who has brownfield cleanup experience, and they're in the process of converting that property, cleaning it up, and turning it into new industrial warehousing space. Next slide. We have, as Ashita mentioned, one of the programs is not offered this year through the grant solicitation, but Niagara County has been very fortunate. We have gotten $12 million almost in the Brownfields Cleanup Revolving Loan Fund program from EPA. So we have a very active program. And this has allowed us to provide loans as well as subgrants to eligible properties for assistance with their cleanup costs. Next slide. I wanted to put this in here as an example. I love this project. It's in North Tonawanda, and it is 2 women who took on this brownfield property. They were not developers per se, both architects, great people, and really believed in the community. They took on a property that was formerly a lumber mill and had a variety of commercial uses to it that contaminated the site. And when I tell you, they utilized almost every funding source I can think of, I mean it. So we started out on this property. It had been condemned by the city, and we used our EPA assessment grants to do phase 1s and phase 2 on the property. There's still some gaps in it, so we tapped into the EPA targeted brownfields assessment program to do a little bit more investigation on the property, figure out what was there. They had National Grid funding. They got a loan from Niagara County, our Brownfields Revolving Loan Fund, and they're also in the State Brownfields Cleanup Program. They're within the BOA. I believe they're in the DRI area. And they also got some smart communities funding. They're doing a lot of green infrastructure in the property. So it's a really great example of how you need to do capital stacking and all the little pieces that can come together to really make a project financially feasible. Next slide. This project on River Road, it was a great success story. It's a huge investment that's happened in North Tonawanda. It was a former iron manufacturing facility, and they entered into the Brownfields cleanup program with the state for 600 River Road. They received a loan from the county's Brownfields Revolving Loan Fund that is funded by EPA. And because of the success of the first property, they actually purchased the Brownfield site next door and expanded the development. And now we have some beautiful waterfront housing units as well as some commercial space right on River Road and the Niagara River. Next slide. So I have to take this opportunity to put a little plug in there for all these tax delinquent properties. We are moving forward with them. So there's two properties on your screen. One of them is a tax delinquent manufacturing facility that Niagara County is moving forward with foreclosure on. And it is an opportunity for some type of industrial warehousing type development. A lot of these incentives may be available for the property. It was a former state Superfund site that has been remediated to some level, but there's still environmental issues that are preventing it from moving forward. The other property on the screen, it was an elementary school in the city of Niagara Falls. The city was able to use EPA's assessment money through the county's grants as well as cleanup money. So the site is clean and is ready for redevelopment. So it's a great redevelopment opportunity. It's already owned by the city of Niagara Falls. And, you know, if there's anybody who's interested in that site, obviously they can contact our office and also the city of Niagara Falls planning office. Next slide. We have lots of brownfield opportunities. You know, those two are just a couple of examples, but all of the properties you see on your screen, they're currently being advertised for sale on the Niagara Orleans Landbank.com website. I highly encourage you to check out that website. We're putting up information on there all the time about available properties. The majority of these brownfield sites, they represent opportunities for going forward with either the Brownfields Cleanup Program, getting funding from Niagara County, or National Grid Brownfields programs. So there's definitely a lot of opportunities out there in Niagara County. So come see us and we will find the property that fits you. Next slide. So what's next? I'm working, like I said, on updating our inventory. We have a consulting firm out today actually doing drone footage. So we're going to be putting together a story map of opportunities. We're continuing to apply for grants. I am currently working on a $1.5 million grant application to EPA. As she did, that's coming your way. And, you know, we're constantly looking for interested partners and developers who want to move brownfield properties forward. We have a suite of incentives, both the brownfield side as well as the economic and development incentives through our IDA, as well as other programs and that our partners offer. So we would love to work with you to advance some of these brownfield sites in Niagara County. Next slide, I think it's the last. And then this is my contact information. And I want to take just 2 seconds and give a big shout out. Thank you to Kathy Seiner in our office, who spent a lot of time putting this together and making all these workshops go so seamless. So thank you, Kathy. We're lucky to have you. And that's all I got.
Big ditto on that for sure. Kathy puts a lot of effort into these programs and we really appreciate the work. Thank you, Amy. As you can see, there's an awful lot out there for all of you to look into. Just another quick reminder, if you're looking at a project in Niagara County on a brownfield or any other site, there are a number of other local, state, federal programs that are out there to assist you. This next slide that Kathy's going to bring up depicts some of those programs, which include various tax incentives, energy efficiency, low-cost power, workforce development and training, and a whole heck of a lot more. Again, you can get more information by watching the workshops on the featured events page of our website. Just scroll down to past events and you'll find them, or you can call myself or Kathy Seiner in my office at 278-8750. The area code is 716-278-8750. We're always here answering the phone to give you more information. Finally, we're going to be conducting one more virtual workshop later this year that'll focus on energy efficiency and low-cost power programs. and there'll be some great information there. National Grid's going to be joining us on that one as well. So please, we look forward to seeing you at a future event. Again, thanks to all of our presenters today. I appreciate your value. When you leave this session, you're going to receive a survey that'll appear in a new window of your internet browser. And we would appreciate your comments and feedback. They help us create the next 2024 series of business workshops. And hopefully we'll see you again sometime down the road. Again, thanks to everybody. Have yourself a great day and a great weekend.